36 hours before the wedding, everything still looked perfect. That was the problem. From the outside, Charlotte Bennett's life had become something people envied. The venue alone looked like a scene pulled from a luxury magazine, white roses imported from France, crystal chandeliers hanging beneath a glass ceiling, and a guest list filled with names that appeared on the front pages of business journals and society columns. And at the center of it all was her. The bride. Elegant. Composed. Smiling exactly when she needed to. And beside her, Nathan Calloway. The man everyone called Man of the Year. A brilliant attorney. Charismatic. Powerful. Untouchable. The kind of man mothers hoped their daughters would marry. The kind of man Charlotte thought she had been lucky to find. Until that morning. It started with a message. Not dramatic. Not threatening. Just quiet. A notification that appeared on her phone while she was sitting alone in the bridal suite, reviewing seating arrangements that no longer felt important. Unknown number. No name. No introduction. Just a sentence. Ask your fiancé about Boston. Charlotte frowned slightly. At first, it felt like a prank. Something meaningless. Something easy to ignore. But something about it didn't feel random. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Then she typed back. Who is this? No reply. Seconds passed. Then another message appeared. He has a wife. Charlotte's breath stopped. Not fully. Just enough to make the room feel smaller. Her eyes scanned the words again. Slowly. Carefully. As if reading them too quickly would make them more real. And a son. 4 years old. Silence. The kind that presses against your chest. The kind that doesn't let you breathe the same way again. Charlotte let out a soft, controlled exhale, placing the phone down as if it had suddenly become something fragile, or dangerous. This wasn't possible. Nathan Calloway didn't make mistakes like this. Nathan Calloway didn't have secrets like this. Nathan Calloway was perfect. That's what everyone said. That's what she believed. But belief is fragile. And doubt? It spreads fast. She picked up her phone again. No more messages. Just those 3 lines. Cold. Precise. Impossible to ignore. And in that moment, Charlotte made a decision that would destroy everything. She didn't confront Nathan. She didn't call him. She didn't ask questions. Because deep down, she already knew. People like Nathan didn't get exposed by accident. They got exposed because someone wanted them to be. Which meant there was truth behind it. And Charlotte Bennett was not the kind of woman who waited for answers. She went to find them. Boston was colder than she expected. Not just the weather. The feeling. The air itself felt heavier, like it carried something unspoken beneath the surface. Charlotte stood across the street, her coat pulled tightly around her body, her eyes fixed on the house in front of her. It wasn't extravagant. Not like the places Nathan had taken her. It was normal. A quiet suburban home. Warm lights glowing behind the curtains. A child's bicycle resting near the front porch. And then the door opened. Charlotte's breath caught. A woman stepped out. Mid-30s. Soft features. Tired eyes. Holding the hand of a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 4. Laughing. Carefree. Safe. And then Nathan appeared behind them. Smiling. Relaxed. Different. Not the polished, calculated man the world saw. Not the controlled, flawless fiancé Charlotte knew. This version of him was real. And that made it worse. Charlotte didn't move. She couldn't. Because in that moment, everything shattered. Not loudly. Not violently. But completely. The woman turned slightly, saying something Charlotte couldn't hear. Nathan leaned down, kissing the child's head. Then he kissed her. Softly. Naturally. Like it was routine. Like it was home. Charlotte stepped back. Once. Then again. Until she couldn't see them anymore. Until the image burned into her mind was all that remained. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Because this wasn't heartbreak. This was realization. 3 years. 3 years of carefully built trust. 3 years of believing she was loved. 3 years of being lied to. And suddenly, everything about Nathan Calloway made sense. The late nights. The unexplained trips. The way he always controlled conversations when things got too personal. The way he smiled just a little too perfectly. He wasn't perfect. He was practiced. And that was far more dangerous. The rain started as she walked back to her car. Soft at first. Then heavier. Until the world blurred around her. Charlotte sat inside, gripping the steering wheel, her breathing uneven for the first time that day. And finally, the tears came. Not loud. Not broken. Just silent. Because something inside her wasn't just hurt. It was undone. But what terrified her the most was not the betrayal. It was the realization of what kind of man Nathan truly was. A man who could live 2 lives. A man who could love 2 women. A man who could look her in the eyes. And lie without hesitation. And if he could do that, then what else was he capable of? The thought settled deep. Heavy. Cold. Unavoidable. And that's when Charlotte understood something she hadn't before. She wasn't just engaged to the wrong man. She was about to marry someone dangerous. That night, she returned to her hotel room. Alone. Drenched in silence. Her phone lay on the table in front of her. She stared at it for a long time. Because there was only one name in her mind. One person she hadn't thought about in years. One person she had forced herself to forget. Ethan Hayes. 7 years. 7 years since he disappeared without a word. 7 years since she last saw him. 7 years since she told herself he was gone. And yet, her fingers moved. Without hesitation. Without overthinking. As if some part of her had been waiting for this moment. She typed slowly. Carefully. Each word carrying weight. Each letter pulling something from the past back into the present. If you still want me, come get me. She stared at the message. 6 words. That shouldn't matter anymore. That shouldn't change anything. And yet, they did. Her thumb hovered over the screen for a brief moment. Then, she pressed send. The message disappeared. And with it, the last piece of the life she thought she had. Charlotte leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as the storm outside grew louder. Because somewhere, deep down, she knew. This wasn't just a message. It was a risk. A decision. A point of no return. And what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that somewhere far away, a man who had been waiting for 7 years had just read those words. And everything was about to change. There are people you leave behind. And then there are people who never really leave you. No matter how many years pass, no matter how much distance you put between the past and the present, they remain, quietly, patiently, like a shadow that only appears when the light hits at the right angle. For Charlotte Bennett, Ethan Hayes had been both. A memory she buried. A name she stopped saying. Most of them didn't matter. But something about this one felt different. He pulled the phone from his pocket, unlocking the screen with a smooth motion. And then everything stopped. Not visibly. Not in a way anyone else would notice. But inside him, time shifted. Because there it was. A number he didn't recognize. And beneath it, 6 words. If you still want me, come get me. No name. No explanation. No context. But Ethan didn't need any of that. Because there was only one person in the world who would ever send him something like this. Only one. Charlotte. His grip tightened slightly around the phone, though his expression didn't change. Not outwardly. But inside. 7 years collapsed into a single moment. Her laughter. Her voice. The way she used to look at him like he was enough. Like he didn't need to become anything more than what he already was. And then. The day everything ended. No warning. No goodbye that made sense. Just silence. And absence. He had searched. Of course he had. 4 months. Then longer. Until eventually, the truth became unavoidable. She hadn't disappeared. She had chosen to leave. And that was something even harder to accept. Ethan exhaled slowly, his thumb brushing over the screen as he read the message again. Once. Twice. A third time. As if repetition might reveal something hidden between the lines. It didn't. But one thing was clear. She wouldn't have sent this. Unless something was wrong. Very wrong. Boss? The voice came from behind him. Calm. Respectful. Raymond. The man who had been with him for years now, the only one who knew enough to ask questions, and smart enough to know when not to. Ethan didn't turn. Prepare the jet, he said. No hesitation. No explanation. Raymond paused briefly. Destination? Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the message. New York. A beat. That's sooner than scheduled. I'm aware. Something in Ethan's tone shifted just enough to make Raymond understand. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a decision. And decisions like this didn't come lightly. Understood, Raymond replied, already turning to give orders. Within seconds, the quiet hangar came alive. Engines powered up. Crew moved with urgency. Everything adjusted around a single command. Because when Ethan Hayes moved, the world around him moved with him. But even as the jet prepared for departure, Ethan remained still. Because the message wasn't the only thing on his mind. It was the timing. Charlotte Bennett was getting married. He knew that. Not because he followed her life. But because information found its way to him, especially when it involved people connected to larger networks. Nathan Calloway. The name alone had been enough to trigger interest. Not personal. Professional. A lawyer. Clean reputation. Too clean. Men like that didn't exist without something underneath. Ethan had looked into him once. Briefly. And what he found didn't add up. It wasn't proof. Not yet. But it was enough to mark Nathan as someone worth watching. And now, Charlotte was about to marry him. And she had sent that message. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Because the implication was clear. She wasn't just unsure. She was asking for help. And Charlotte never asked for help. Not unless she had no other choice. The jet engines roared to life behind him, the sound cutting through the silence like a signal. Time was moving again. Fast. Ethan slipped the phone back into his pocket, turning at last. His expression was calm. Controlled. But his eyes. They were different. Focused. Sharp. Like something had been awakened. "Everything's ready," Raymond said, stepping beside him. Ethan nodded once. Then started walking. Not rushed. Not frantic. But with purpose. Because whatever waited for him in New York. He already knew one thing. This wasn't just about a wedding. This wasn't just about Charlotte. This was something bigger. Something that had been building long before that message was sent. And now, it was about to surface. As the jet lifted into the night sky, cutting through clouds illuminated by distant lightning, Ethan stood by the window, looking out at nothing and everything at the same time. 7 years. He had spent 7 years building something. An empire. Not for power. Not for control. But for a single purpose. To find the truth. About his brother. About the network that had taken everything from him. And now, that path had led here. To her. Again. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. Unrecognizable from the man he used to be. Stronger. Colder. More dangerous. But beneath all of that, there was still something else. Something he hadn't lost. Something that had been waiting. Just like this moment. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Then opened them again. Steady. Certain. Because this time, he wouldn't lose her. Not to silence. Not to distance. And definitely not to another man. Back in New York, the night had grown darker. The storm hadn't stopped. Rain tapped softly against the windows of Charlotte's hotel room as she sat alone, her phone resting beside her. No reply. Not yet. And for a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe he wouldn't come. Maybe 7 years was too long. Maybe she had already lost the one person she never should have let go. But then, her phone lit up. A single message. From an unknown number. Her breath caught as she picked it up. And read. "Stay where you are. Don't trust anyone. I'm coming." Charlotte closed her eyes, her grip tightening around the phone. Because in that moment, everything became real. He was coming. And whatever happened next, there was no turning back. There is a particular kind of fear that doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't crash into you like panic. It doesn't overwhelm you with noise or chaos. It builds quietly. Piece by piece. Until one day, you realize you are no longer safe. And the most terrifying part? You don't know when that change began. Charlotte didn't sleep that night. Not really. She lay on the edge of the bed, eyes open, listening to the rain against the glass, replaying everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Boston. The house. The child. Nathan. And then, Ethan. The message still glowed faintly in her memory. "Stay where you are. Don't trust anyone. I'm coming." It should have made her feel safe. And in some way, it did. But it also meant something else. Something heavier. Something she couldn't ignore. If Ethan had said not to trust anyone, then that included Nathan. And if that was true, then she wasn't just dealing with betrayal. She was standing in the middle of something far more dangerous than she had imagined. The knock on the door came at exactly 2:17 a.m. Soft. Precise. Not loud enough to alarm anyone. But deliberate enough to demand attention. Charlotte froze. Her eyes moved slowly toward the door, her breath quiet, controlled. No one was supposed to be here. Not at this hour. Not without notice. The knock came again. Same rhythm. Same calm insistence. And then, a voice. "Charlotte." Her stomach dropped. "Nathan." For a moment, she didn't move. didn't respond. You left this morning without saying anything, he said casually. I had errands, Charlotte replied. A lie. But it didn't matter. Nathan nodded once, as if accepting the answer. Boston? He asked. Silence. Not long. But long enough. And in that moment, everything shifted. Charlotte felt it. Like a thread snapping. Because he knew. Not guessed. Not suspected. Knew. Her heart began to beat faster, but she kept her expression controlled. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Nathan smiled. Softly. But this time, it didn't reach his eyes. That's not like you, Charlotte, he said quietly. You're not a liar. The words weren't loud. They weren't aggressive. But they landed heavier than anything else he could have said. Because they weren't just a statement. They were a warning. Nathan took a slow step closer. Not invading her space. But close enough. You should have told me if something was bothering you, he continued, his tone calm, almost gentle. We're about to get married. Another step. You don't have to go looking for answers on your own. Charlotte's fingers curled slightly at her sides. Because now she understood. This wasn't concern. This wasn't care. This was control. Carefully wrapped in something that looked like kindness. I saw her. The words came out before she could stop them. Nathan paused. Just slightly. Then. That must have been difficult, he said. No denial. No panic. No attempt to lie. Just calm acceptance. And somehow, that was worse. Charlotte stared at him, disbelief rising in her chest. You're not even going to explain? She asked. Nathan's gaze held hers, steady, unreadable. There are things you don't understand, he said. That's not an explanation. No, he agreed. It's not. Silence filled the room again. Heavy. Tense. Different now. Because the illusion was gone. Charlotte took a step back. You have a wife, she said. Nathan didn't respond. You have a child. Still nothing. And you were going to marry me anyway? This time, Nathan exhaled slowly. Not annoyed. Not frustrated. Just, patient. As I said, he replied, there are things you don't understand. Charlotte shook her head, a bitter edge creeping into her voice. Then help me understand. Nathan studied her for a moment. Then stepped even closer. Close enough that she could see every detail in his eyes. And for the first time, she felt something she had never felt around him before. Fear. You're safe with me, he said quietly. The words should have been comforting. But they weren't. Not anymore. Everything you have, everything you are about to become, exists because of me. Charlotte's breath tightened. Don't do anything reckless, he added softly. Another pause. Then. Don't make me fix something that doesn't need to be broken. There it was. Not loud. Not violent. But unmistakable. A threat. Wrapped in calm. Delivered with a smile. Nathan stepped back, adjusting his coat slightly as if the conversation had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. We'll talk more after the wedding, he said. As if the wedding was still happening. As if nothing had changed. As if she still belonged to him. His hand moved to the door. Then he stopped. Turning back just slightly. One more thing, he added. Charlotte didn't move. Stay in tonight. A small pause. For your own good. And with that, he left. The door closed. And the silence that followed was suffocating. Charlotte stood frozen in place, her heart pounding now, her breath uneven. Because everything she had feared was real. Nathan wasn't just lying. He wasn't just cheating. He was controlling something far deeper. Something she didn't understand yet. But one thing was clear. She was not free. Not yet. Her phone vibrated again. Charlotte grabbed it instantly, her hands trembling slightly. Another message. From Ethan. He came to see you. Her breath caught. He knew. Listen carefully, the next message appeared. You are not safe. They're going to try something tonight. Charlotte's chest tightened. Do exactly as I say. Don't open the door for anyone. My people are already there. A pause. Then the final line. I'm closer than you think. Charlotte looked around the room, her pulse racing now. Because suddenly, every shadow felt different. Every sound carried meaning. And the night was far from over. Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it listens. It waits. It studies the silence around you until every small sound becomes a question, and every shadow feels like an answer you're not ready to face. Charlotte stood in the center of the room, her phone still in her hand, Ethan's message echoing in her mind. They're going to try something tonight. Not might. Not could. Will. That certainty changed everything. Because it meant one thing. Nathan wasn't done. The rain outside had softened, but the quiet that followed only made the tension worse. The city beyond the glass continued moving, unaware that inside one room, a life was about to be forced in a direction it could never return from. Charlotte walked slowly toward the door, her steps controlled, careful. Locked. She checked it again. Then the windows. Closed. Secure. Everything looked normal. But nothing felt safe. Her breath steadied slightly as she stepped back, forcing herself to think, really think, for the first time since Nathan walked out. If he knew she went to Boston. If he didn't deny anything. If he was already warning her. Then this wasn't about hiding anymore. It was about control. And people like Nathan didn't lose control easily. They took it back. By force if necessary. A faint sound. Behind her. Charlotte turned sharply. Nothing. Just the room. Still. Silent. Her pulse didn't slow. Because instinct doesn't disappear just because you can't see the danger. It sharpens. Her phone vibrated again. She looked down immediately. Ethan, stay away from the minibar. Charlotte froze. Her eyes moved slowly across the room. Landing on the small tray of drinks near the couch. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't touched anything. But now. She wouldn't. Charlotte, how do you know? The reply came almost instantly. Ethan, because I know how men like him think. A second message followed. You're being watched. Don't panic. Act normal. Charlotte swallowed slowly. Being watched. The words didn't feel dramatic. They felt real. Too real. Her eyes moved again, scanning the room, not in fear this time, but in awareness. Where? How? Camera? Someone outside? Her thoughts raced, but she forced herself to stay still. Normal. Act normal. Then. A soft click. Barely audible. From the far side of the room. Charlotte's breath caught. The connecting door. She hadn't noticed it before. A door leading to the adjacent suite. Closed. But now. The handle moved. Slowly. Carefully. And then. It opened. A man stepped inside. Dressed in hotel staff uniform. Clean. Ordinary. The kind of face you would forget seconds after seeing. And that was exactly what made him dangerous. Charlotte didn't scream. Didn't move. Because something then. Ethan sent me. Everything shifted. Again. But this time. Not into fear. Into something else. Relief. Not complete. Not safe yet. But enough to breathe. Raymond moved quickly, efficient in every motion, checking the room, the doors, the windows. They tried faster than expected, he said, mostly to himself. Charlotte stepped closer, her voice quieter now. They were going to drug me. Yes. And then what? Raymond looked at her directly. You would wake up tomorrow, he said calmly. Confused. Disoriented. Compliant. Charlotte's stomach dropped. They would finish the wedding, he added. And you wouldn't be in a state to resist. Silence. Heavy. Terrifying. Because it made sense. Perfect sense. Charlotte wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady the tremor that had finally reached her. This isn't just about marriage, she whispered. Raymond shook his head. No, he said. It never was. Her phone vibrated again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She picked it up immediately. Ethan, are you okay? Her fingers moved quickly. Charlotte, yes. Someone came. Raymond stopped him. A pause. Then. Ethan, good. Another message followed. Slower this time. More deliberate. Listen carefully. From now on, everything you do must look normal. Charlotte frowned slightly. What do you mean? The reply came. And this time. It changed everything. You're still going to the wedding. Charlotte stared at the screen. Her breath caught. What? Why? After everything. After this. Why would she walk back into that? Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed. Are you serious? A pause. Longer this time. Then. Trust me. Charlotte looked up slowly. At Raymond. At the unconscious man on the floor. At the door Nathan had walked through earlier. And suddenly. She understood. This wasn't about escaping anymore. This was about something bigger. Something planned. Something dangerous. Something Ethan had been preparing for long before tonight. Why the wedding? She asked quietly. Raymond met her gaze. And for the first time. There was a faint hint of something behind his calm expression. Respect. Because, he said. That's where everything ends. Charlotte's heart pounded again. But this time. Not from fear. From realization. Because she had made a choice when she sent that message. And now. She was part of something she couldn't walk away from. Not halfway. Not safely. Not quietly. Outside, the storm had passed. But the night was only just beginning. Morning arrived without permission. It slipped through the curtains in pale, indifferent light, as if nothing had happened the night before, as if no one had tried to take Charlotte's will away, as if the world hadn't quietly revealed how dangerous it truly was. But Charlotte knew. And once you know, you can't unknow. She stood in front of the mirror, her reflection calm, composed, almost serene. The kind of calm that had been trained into her over years, smile when expected, respond when needed, never let uncertainty show. But this wasn't the same kind of calm anymore. This was control. Chosen. Deliberate. Because now she understood something she hadn't before. Survival wasn't about running. It was about knowing when to stay. And how to act. Behind her, the room had already been reset. Clean. Orderly. As if the events of the night had never happened. The unconscious man was gone. The connecting door sealed. Every trace erased. Raymond's work. Efficient. Invisible. Exactly the way Ethan operated. Charlotte lifted her chin slightly, studying herself in the mirror. No fear. No hesitation. Just a bride preparing for her wedding. And that was the most dangerous part. Her phone buzzed softly on the table. She didn't need to check. She already knew. Still, she walked over, picking it up. Ethan, good morning. A strange message. Simple. Almost normal. Charlotte stared at it for a moment before replying. Charlotte, I didn't sleep. The response came quickly. Ethan, I know. A pause. Then. But you're still standing. Charlotte let out a quiet breath. Yes. She was. Charlotte, tell me exactly what you're planning. This time, the reply took longer. Not hesitation. Precision. And when it came, it wasn't a full answer. Ethan, not yet. Her brows tightened slightly. Charlotte, that's not enough. Another pause. Then. Because if you know everything, you might react differently. Charlotte stared at the screen. Her jaw tightened. Charlotte, you don't trust me? The reply came instantly. I trust you more than anyone. A second message followed. That's why I need your reactions to be real. Charlotte exhaled slowly. And in that moment, she understood. This wasn't about control. It was about timing. If she knew too much, Nathan would see it. And if Nathan saw it, everything would fall apart. Charlotte, what do I do? The answer came. Clear. Simple. Terrifying. You become the perfect bride. The words settled in. Heavy. Unavoidable. Because pretending meant stepping directly into the world she now knew was a lie. Standing beside a man she no longer trusted. Smiling at people who believed in something that didn't exist. And walking down an aisle. That could have ended her life. There was a knock on the door. This time. Expected. Soft voices followed. Charlotte? It's us. Her bridesmaids. The normal world. Still moving. Still unaware. Charlotte locked her phone, placing it face down on the table. Then she turned back to the mirror. One last look. One last moment of truth. Before the performance began. Come in, she said. The door opened, and suddenly the room filled with energy, laughter, excitement, the soft chaos of people preparing for a wedding. Look at you, one of them smiled. You're glowing. Charlotte returned the smile. Perfectly. Just trying to keep up with everything. They didn't notice anything. Of course they didn't. Because Charlotte Bennett had always been good at this. At blending in. At giving people exactly what they expected to see. Hours passed quickly. Too quickly. Hair. Makeup. Fittings. Conversations. Every second filled with something designed to keep her occupied, distracted, moving forward without stopping to think. But Charlotte wasn't distracted. She was watching. Listening. Not just to what people said. But to what they didn't. Nathan arrived in the early afternoon. Of course he did. The perfect fiancé. Checking in. Making sure everything was going smoothly. Charlotte felt at the moment he entered the room. Not fear. Not panic. Awareness. Like stepping onto a stage where every movement mattered. He smiled when he saw her. That same perfect smile. But now, she could see through it. You look beautiful, he said. Charlotte met his gaze. Thank you. Simple. Controlled. Nothing more. Nathan stepped closer, his eyes scanning her face, not admiring, not appreciating, Assessing. Looking for something. A crack. And somewhere above the city, a helicopter sat waiting. Silent. Invisible. Ready. Because when the moment came, there would be no hesitation. No second chances. No turning back. Only one choice. And everything was about to collide. Evening settled over the city like a promise no one could quite trust. From the outside, everything moved exactly as it should. Lights flickered on across the skyline, traffic flowed in slow golden lines beneath glass towers, and somewhere in the heart of it all, a celebration began to take shape, quiet, elegant, carefully curated. The rehearsal dinner. A smaller stage before the main performance. A place where everything appeared intimate. And nothing was accidental. Charlotte arrived precisely on time. Of course she did. The venue was one of Nathan's choices, private, exclusive, unreachable to anyone who wasn't invited. A rooftop restaurant overlooking the river, enclosed in glass, designed to make every guest feel elevated, and every exit feel distant. She noticed that immediately. Not with panic, but with awareness. There were only 2 visible exits. And at least 3 men who didn't belong to the waitstaff. Nathan's people. Watching. Always watching. Charlotte. A warm voice cut through the air as she stepped inside. Nathan's mother. Graceful. Elegant. Proud. The kind of woman who believed everything in her son's life had been earned, and deserved. Charlotte smiled, stepping forward to greet her. "You look stunning," the older woman said, taking her hands gently. "Thank you. You must be excited." Charlotte held the smile. "I am." And somewhere, deep beneath that answer, a different truth settled quietly into place. She wasn't excited. She was ready. Nathan appeared moments later, as if timed perfectly to her arrival. He crossed the room with the same effortless confidence, greeting guests, shaking hands, commanding attention without ever asking for it. When his eyes met hers, he smiled. That same smile. Unchanged. Unbroken. As if nothing in the world could touch him. He reached her side, his hand resting lightly against her back. Possessive. Subtle. Claiming. "You made it," he said. Charlotte turned her head slightly toward him. "I said I would." A pause. Then Nathan leaned in just enough for only her to hear. "I'm glad you're being cooperative." The word lingered, sharp beneath its softness. Charlotte didn't react. Didn't pull away. Didn't break the moment. Instead, she smiled slightly wider. "Would you prefer something else?" she asked quietly. Nathan studied her for half a second longer than necessary. Then, "No," he said. "This is perfect." Dinner unfolded like a carefully written script. Toasts. Laughter. Stories. Every moment designed to reinforce one narrative. Nathan Calloway was a man worth celebrating. And Charlotte Bennett was lucky to have him. But Charlotte wasn't listening to the words anymore. She was watching the details. The way Nathan interacted with certain guests, more reserved with some, more calculated with others. The subtle nods exchanged across the room. The way those same 3 men shifted positions without drawing attention. Security. Not for protection. For control. Her phone remained hidden in her clutch. Silent. But present. A reminder. A connection. To the only person who knew what was really happening. Halfway through dinner, Nathan stood to give a toast. The room quieted immediately. Because when a man like him speaks, people listen. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began, his voice calm, confident, perfectly measured. "For those who know me, you understand how important trust is in my life." Charlotte felt it. That word. Trust. He let it linger. Then continued. And for those who don't. A faint smile. You'll learn. Light laughter filled the room. But Charlotte didn't miss the way his eyes flicked toward her. Just for a second. Charlotte, he said, turning slightly. When I met you, I knew immediately you were someone rare. The room softened. People leaned in. Drawn into the moment. She's intelligent, Nathan continued. Composed. Strong in ways most people don't understand. Another pause. Then. And that's exactly why she's perfect for the life we're building. Charlotte held her expression steady. But inside. Something shifted. Because those words. They weren't romantic. They were strategic. He wasn't praising her. He was defining her role. Nathan lifted his glass. To Charlotte. The room echoed the toast. Glasses raised. Smiles exchanged. Everything exactly as it should be. But Charlotte didn't drink. Not even a sip. Because she remembered Ethan's words. Don't trust anyone. Nathan noticed. Of course he did. His gaze flicked to her glass briefly. Then back to her face. A silent question. Charlotte met his eyes. Then slowly. Deliberately. She lifted the glass. And touched it to her lips. Just enough. Not drinking. Just enough to show compliance. Nathan watched her for a moment longer. Then smiled again. Satisfied. For now. As the dinner continued, Charlotte felt it building. Not panic. Not fear. Something else. Tension. Like a wire pulled tight, waiting for the moment it would snap. Her phone vibrated once. Barely noticeable. She didn't look at it immediately. Not until she excused herself calmly. I'll be right back, she said, standing. Nathan nodded. Don't be long. The hallway outside was quiet. Dimly lit. Empty. Charlotte walked slowly, then turned the corner before finally pulling out her phone. A message from Ethan. You're doing exactly right. Her breath steadied slightly. Another message followed. Nathan's network is here tonight. Charlotte's eyes narrowed. She looked back toward the dining room. Then down at the screen again. That's why we needed this. A pause. Then. Tomorrow, everything ends. Charlotte leaned lightly against the wall, her heart beating just a little faster now. Tomorrow. The wedding. The final stage. Charlotte, what happens to him? The reply came slower this time. More deliberate. He loses everything. Charlotte stared at the words. Because for the first time. She believed it. Not as hope. Not as possibility. But as certainty. Charlotte, and us? A longer pause. Long enough to feel. Then. We finish what we started. Her breath caught slightly. Because those words. They weren't about the plan. They were about something else. Something older. Something unfinished. Charlotte locked her phone, slipping it back into her clutch. Then she straightened, smoothing her dress, her expression returning to perfect calm. When she walked back into the room. Nothing had changed. Not visibly. Not yet. But beneath the surface. Everything was moving. Pieces aligning. Decisions already made. And as Nathan turned to look at her again. Smiling. Confident. Certain of his control. Charlotte returned the smile. Just as perfectly. Because tomorrow. He would learn the truth. And there would be no escape. Morning didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like a countdown. The city woke slowly, light spreading across glass towers and quiet streets, but for Charlotte, time moved differently now, measured not in hours, but in moments left before everything collided. Her wedding day. Because if he wasn't speaking, it meant he was already moving. Outside, the venue transformed into something almost unreal. Hundreds of guests. Luxury cars arriving one after another. Security layered carefully beneath the surface, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. But Charlotte saw it now. Every detail. Every movement. Every quiet adjustment. Nathan had built this like a fortress. And yet, he still believed he was in control. A soft knock came at the door. 5 minutes. Charlotte nodded. Her reflection stared back at her one last time. Not the woman she used to be. Not the woman Nathan thought he owned. But someone else entirely. Someone who had already made her choice. The music began outside. Soft. Measured. The signal. It was time. Charlotte stepped into the hallway, her heels echoing lightly against the marble floor. Each step felt steady. Deliberate. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Because fear had passed. And what remained was resolve. At the end of the aisle, Nathan stood waiting. Perfect as always. Tailored suit. Calm expression. A man who believed this moment belonged to him. When he saw her, his smile appeared. Warm. Controlled. Victorious. Charlotte walked forward. Slowly. Every eye in the room following her. Every camera capturing the image. Every guest believing they were witnessing something beautiful. Something real. But as she moved closer, something shifted. Not inside her. Around her. A subtle change in the air. A tension that hadn't been there seconds before. Nathan noticed it too. Just slightly. A flicker in his gaze. Gone almost immediately. But enough. Charlotte reached the altar. Standing across from him now. Close enough to see every detail. Every flaw beneath the perfection. You look stunning, Nathan said quietly. Charlotte held his gaze. Thank you. The officiant began speaking. Words about love. Commitment. Partnership. All the things that should have meant something. All the things that meant nothing now. Nathan reached for her hand. Charlotte let him take it. Because this was part of the role. Part of the illusion. But inside, she was waiting. For the moment. The one Ethan had promised. The one everything had been leading toward. And do you, Nathan Calloway? The officiant's voice carried across the room. Steady. Clear. Unaware. Charlotte's heart beat once. Slow. Heavy. Then. A sound. Low at first. Distant. Almost mistaken for thunder. Nathan's eyes shifted upward. Just slightly. The sound grew louder. Closer. Unmistakable now. A helicopter. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned. Voices rose in confusion. The perfect moment. Fracturing. Charlotte didn't move. Didn't react. Because this was it. The glass ceiling above reflected the spinning blades. Wind beginning to stir. Energy shifting through the entire space. Nathan's grip on her hand tightened. Not gently. Not affectionately. But firmly. Possessive. Trying to hold control. What is this? He murmured. Not to her. To himself. Charlotte met his eyes. And for the first time, she smiled. Not the practiced smile. Not the perfect bride. Something else. Something real. You should have told me everything, she said softly. Nathan's expression changed. Just slightly. But enough. Because in that moment, he understood. Too late. The doors at the far end of the venue opened. Not violently. Not dramatically. But with quiet authority. And then he walked in. Ethan Hayes. No rush. No hesitation. Just presence. The kind that didn't need to demand attention. Because it already had it. The room fell silent. Completely. Because something about him didn't belong to this world. Charlotte's breath caught. Not from fear. Not from doubt. But from recognition. 7 years. And somehow, he was still the same. And completely different. Ethan's eyes found hers instantly. Not searching. Not uncertain. Certain. Like he had always known exactly where she would be. And in that moment, everything else disappeared. The guests. The noise. The chaos beginning to unfold. Because the only thing that mattered was that he came. And what no one in that room understood yet was that this wasn't just an interruption. It was the beginning of the end. There are entrances that demand attention. And then there are entrances that take it, completely, effortlessly, without a single word. Ethan Hayes didn't rush. He didn't need to. Because the moment he stepped into that room, everything that had once belonged to Nathan Calloway, the control, the certainty, the illusion of perfection, began to fracture. Not loudly. But unmistakably. The sound of the helicopter still echoed faintly above, its presence pressing against the glass ceiling like a reminder that something far beyond this carefully constructed world had just arrived. Guests stood frozen. Whispers spread. Confusion turned into something sharper, unease. Because this wasn't part of the plan. Not for them. Not for Nathan. Charlotte didn't move. Not yet. Because this moment. This exact moment. Was the one everything had been leading toward. Nathan's grip on her hand tightened again. Harder this time. Not enough to draw attention. But enough to reveal something he had never shown before. Control slipping. "What did you do?" he asked quietly, his voice still calm, but no longer effortless. Charlotte didn't look away. "Nothing you didn't deserve," she replied. Nathan's jaw tightened. And for the first time, his smile disappeared. Ethan continued walking forward. Step by step. Measured. Unhurried. But with a certainty that made every person in the room instinctively step aside without even realizing they were doing it. Because some men don't need permission to move through a space. They take it. Behind him, a small group followed, quiet, composed, disciplined. Raymond among them. Eyes scanning. Watching everything. The officiant stopped speaking. The ceremony, frozen mid-sentence. Because whatever this was, it had already taken control of the moment. Nathan released Charlotte's hand slowly, turning fully now to face the man approaching. "Ethan Hayes," he said. The name wasn't spoken loudly. But it carried. Because recognition changes everything. Ethan stopped a few feet away. Close enough. Not closer. His gaze moved briefly to Charlotte. Just for a second. And in that second, everything was said. "You're safe. I'm here. It's over." Then his attention shifted back to Nathan. "You've built quite a scene," Ethan said calmly. Nathan's expression hardened slightly. "You're interrupting something important." Ethan's lips curved faintly. "I know." A pause. That's the point. Tension filled the space between them. Not loud. Not chaotic. But sharp. Like something waiting for the smallest movement to break. Nathan took a step forward. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Ethan didn't move. "Neither should you," he replied. The words landed heavier than expected. Because beneath them was something deeper. Something that hadn't been spoken yet. For conspiracy, money laundering, and multiple counts of financial fraud. The words continued. But for Charlotte, everything narrowed. Because this was real. Nathan let out a slow breath. Then he smiled. But this time, it wasn't the same smile. It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. It was something else entirely. You think this ends here? He asked softly. Ethan didn't answer. Because the answer was already unfolding. Charlotte reached up slowly. Her fingers moving to the ring on her hand. The one that had symbolized everything she thought her life would become. She slid it off. The movement was small. But it carried weight. Because it was final. Nathan's eyes flicked to it. Just for a second. Then Charlotte stepped forward. Not toward him. Away from him. And in that moment, the illusion shattered completely. She crossed the space between her and Ethan. Each step steady. Certain. Unstoppable. Until she reached him. For a brief second. They stood facing each other. 7 years of silence. Broken. In a single moment. You came, she said softly. Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. I said I would. Charlotte exhaled. A breath she didn't realize she had been holding for years. Behind them, the world was falling apart. Nathan being surrounded. Voices rising. Control disappearing. But none of that mattered. Not anymore. Because Charlotte made her choice. And what came next would change everything. There is always a moment, quiet, unmistakable, when everything you once believed dissolves, and what remains is truth. Not the version people told you. Not the version you hoped for. But the one that stands in front of you, undeniable. For Charlotte Bennett, that moment had arrived. Not when she saw Nathan in Boston. Not when he stood in her room and threatened her without raising his voice. Not even when the man with the syringe stepped through the door. No. This moment. Standing in front of Ethan, with the world unraveling behind her. This was the one that mattered. Because this time, she wasn't reacting. She was choosing. The room had lost all structure. What had once been a perfectly orchestrated ceremony was now chaos wrapped in disbelief. Guests whispered urgently, some stepping back, others pulling out their phones, desperate to capture something they didn't understand. Nathan stood surrounded. Not restrained yet. But contained. And for the first time, he wasn't the one controlling the room. Charlotte didn't turn back immediately. Because she didn't need to. She already knew what she would see. Not the man she thought she loved. Not the future she once believed in. But the truth. Cold. Calculated. Dangerous. You don't have to do this. Nathan's voice cut through the noise. Not loud. Not desperate. Still controlled. Still composed. But something beneath it had changed. Charlotte closed her eyes for a brief second. Then opened them again. Slowly. And turned. Nathan was watching her. Not the agents. Not Ethan. Her. Because even now, he believed this was something he could fix. You're confused, he continued. This isn't what you think it is. Charlotte tilted her head slightly. A small movement. Almost thoughtful. Then tell me what it is, she said. A pause. Not long. But enough. Because for the first time, Nathan didn't answer immediately. The agents moved closer. One step. Then another. Closing the distance. Nathan ignored them. Completely. His focus remained locked on Charlotte. Everything I've done, he said slowly, choosing his words with care, was to build something. Charlotte's gaze didn't waver. At whose expense, she asked. Another pause. Then. For us. The words hung in the air. Fragile. Wrong. Almost believable. If she didn't already know the truth. Charlotte let out a quiet breath. Not angry. Not emotional. Just, final. You don't build something real by lying to the person standing next to you, she said. Nathan's jaw tightened slightly. You think he's different? He asked, his eyes flicking briefly toward Ethan. You think he doesn't have secrets? Charlotte didn't respond. Because she already knew the answer. Everyone had secrets. The difference was, some used them to control. Others used them to protect. Nathan stepped forward. The agents reacted immediately. Sir. But he didn't stop. Charlotte, he said, his voice lower now. More intense. Look at me. She did. For 3 years, he continued, I gave you everything. Charlotte's expression didn't change. You gave me an illusion, she replied. The words landed harder than anything else. Because they weren't emotional. They were precise. Nathan's composure cracked. Not fully. But enough. You walked into this willingly, he said. I didn't force you. Charlotte nodded once. That's true. A pause. But you made sure I never saw the full picture. Silence. Because now. There was nothing left to argue. The lead agent stepped forward again. Nathan Calloway, you are under arrest. This time. It wasn't a warning. Hands reached for him. Firm. Controlled. Unavoidable. Nathan didn't resist. Not physically. But his eyes. They remained locked on Charlotte. Until the very last second. This isn't over, he said quietly. Not to the agents. Not to the room. To her. Charlotte held his gaze. And for the first time. There was no hesitation. No, she said. It is. And just like that. It ended. The agents led him away. The crowd parted. Voices rose. The illusion of perfection collapsed completely under the weight of truth. Charlotte stood still. Watching. Not with anger. Not with regret. But with clarity. Because the man who had once controlled everything in her life no longer had any place in it. A hand moved gently toward hers. Not pulling. Not claiming. Just, there. Ethan. Charlotte looked down briefly. Then back up at him. And something in her expression softened. Not into weakness. Into something else. Trust. It's over, she said quietly. Ethan nodded. Yes. A pause. Then. Now we leave. The helicopter above grew louder again. The signal. The final step. Charlotte glanced once more at the room. At the people. At the life she had almost stepped into. Then she turned away. Completely. Without hesitation. Without looking back. Because some doors, once closed, should never be opened again. Ethan extended his hand. This time. Not as a promise. Not as a memory. But as a choice. Charlotte took it. And together. They walked forward. Not into something perfect. Not into something easy. But into something real. And sometimes. That's the only thing that matters. The sound of the helicopter grew louder as they stepped out of the venue, cutting through the chaos behind them like a line drawn between two worlds, one collapsing, the other just beginning. Wind rushed across the terrace, tugging at Charlotte's veil, lifting strands of her hair into the air as if even the world itself was urging her forward. Below them, the city stretched endlessly. Behind, not fragile. Not uncertain. Something stronger. She stepped forward. Into the helicopter. Ethan followed immediately after. The door slid shut. And just like that, the world below them became something distant. The helicopter lifted smoothly, rising above the venue, above the city, above everything that had once felt impossible to leave behind. Charlotte looked down through the glass. The people. The flashing lights. The movement. All shrinking. All fading. It doesn't feel real, she said. Ethan sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his attention entirely on her. It will, he replied. A pause. Just not all at once. Raymond handed her a headset. For communication, he explained briefly. Charlotte took it, slipping it on, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge as she adjusted it. Everything felt different up here. Quieter. Clearer. Where are we going? She asked. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Because the answer wasn't simple. Not anymore. Somewhere safe, he said finally. Charlotte studied him. And after that? A small pause. Then. That depends on you. She held his gaze. Because for the first time in a long time, her future wasn't already decided. Not by expectation. Not by manipulation. Not by someone else's plan. What about Nathan? She asked. Ethan's expression didn't change. He's done. Charlotte frowned slightly. That easy? Ethan shook his head. No, he said. Nothing about this was easy. A brief silence. Then. But everything about it was necessary. Charlotte leaned back slightly, letting the words settle. Because she understood that. More than she wanted to. And you? She asked. Ethan tilted his head slightly. What about me? Charlotte hesitated. Just for a second. Who are you now? The question lingered. Not simple. Not light. Because the man in front of her wasn't the one she had known before. Not entirely. Ethan leaned back slightly, his gaze shifting briefly toward the horizon before returning to her. Someone who learned the hard way, he said. A pause. Someone who doesn't lose what matters twice. Charlotte's breath caught slightly. Because those words. They weren't just about the past. They were about now. And me? She asked quietly. Ethan didn't hesitate this time. You're still the reason. Silence filled the space between them. But it wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hadn't said yet. Everything that had been waiting. The helicopter continued forward, cutting through the sky, leaving behind everything that had once defined them. Charlotte looked out at the horizon. Endless. Uncertain. Free. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel it. Not fear. Not doubt. But something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Because whatever came next, it wouldn't be built on lies. It wouldn't be controlled. It wouldn't be forced. It would be chosen. And somewhere, deep beneath everything that had happened, that felt like the beginning of something real. But what Charlotte didn't know yet, what she couldn't possibly see from this height, was that their story wasn't finished. Not yet. Because the truth had more layers left to reveal. And the past wasn't done with them. Distance has a way of making things look smaller than they really are. From above the clouds, the city that had just nearly trapped Charlotte's future into something irreversible looked distant, almost harmless. Lights scattered like fragments of something broken, fading further with every passing second. But distance doesn't erase truth. It only delays it. The helicopter flew in steady silence for a while. No one rushed to fill it. Not Ethan. Not Raymond. Not even Charlotte. Because something about this moment demanded stillness. After chaos. After decisions that couldn't be undone. There's always a space where everything pauses. Not to rest. But to prepare. Charlotte's fingers rested lightly in her lap, still feeling the absence of the ring she had removed not long ago. Strange. How something so small could carry so much weight. And how removing it didn't feel like loss. It felt like release. She glanced at Ethan again. He hadn't changed positions much since takeoff, but there was something different in the way he carried himself now. Less urgency. More awareness. Like someone who had reached a milestone. But wasn't celebrating yet. Because he knew. This wasn't the end. You said this isn't finished, Charlotte spoke finally, her voice steady but quieter now. Ethan looked at her. I said there are things you still don't know. Charlotte held his gaze. Then tell me. Raymond shifted slightly in his seat but didn't interrupt. Because this part didn't belong to him. Ethan exhaled slowly. Not hesitation. Consideration. Because some truths don't just explain things. They change them. The man you almost married, he began, was never the top of anything. Charlotte's brows drew together slightly. What does that mean? Ethan leaned forward slightly, his forearms resting against his knees. It means Nathan wasn't the one pulling the strings, he said. He was the one cleaning them. Charlotte felt a cold realization settle in. Money laundering, she said quietly. Ethan nodded. For a network that doesn't exist on paper. A pause. Not officially. Charlotte's mind moved quickly, connecting pieces that had never seemed related before. And you've been trying to take them down. Not just trying. A brief pause. I've been building toward it for 7 years. 7 years. The number echoed in her mind. The same amount of time Ethan had been gone. The same amount of time she had tried to move forward without him. Because of your brother, she said. Not a question. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Not visibly to most people. But enough for her to see it. Michael wasn't supposed to die, he said. The words were simple. But heavy. Charlotte leaned forward slightly. You said, wasn't supposed to. Another pause. Longer this time. Because this was where things changed. Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. And when he spoke again, his voice carried something deeper. He didn't. Silence. Absolute. Because some words don't just surprise you. They stop everything. Charlotte blinked. Once. Then again. What? She whispered. Raymond didn't move. Didn't react. Because this had always been Ethan's truth to tell. My brother is alive, Ethan said. Charlotte's breath caught. But you said. I said what everyone believed. Her thoughts collided all at once. But the funeral was real, Ethan replied. The body wasn't his. Charlotte stared at him, trying to process something that didn't fit into anything she thought she understood. Why? She asked. Why would he let people believe he was dead? Ethan leaned back slightly now, his gaze shifting briefly toward the horizon again before returning to her. Because it was the only way to disappear completely, he said. To get inside something that couldn't be reached from the outside. Charlotte's heart began to beat faster again. Not from fear. From realization. He went undercover. Ethan nodded once. For 4 years. A pause. Inside the same network Nathan was working for. Everything shifted. Again. And you knew? Charlotte asked. Ethan's expression didn't change. Not at first. A brief silence. Not until it was already too late to stop him. Charlotte's mind raced. But if he's alive, where is he? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't want to, because the moment you knew, you would have been in danger. Charlotte looked down at her hands. Because now, even the parts of her life that had felt safe had been something else entirely. But why me? She asked quietly. Ethan didn't hesitate this time. Because you were always part of this. Charlotte looked up sharply. What does that mean? Ethan held her gaze. And for the first time since the helicopter took off, there was no distance in his expression. No calculation. No strategy. Just truth. It means, he said, you were never as far from this world as you thought. Charlotte's breath slowed. Because she understood what he wasn't saying yet. What he hadn't fully explained. And just like that, the horizon ahead didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like something waiting. Because the story she thought she had escaped was only just beginning to reveal itself. There are truths that arrive gently. And then there are truths that don't ask for permission. They don't ease you into understanding. They don't soften their edges. They simply appear, and everything you thought you knew has to rearrange itself around them. Charlotte didn't speak for a long time. Not because she didn't have questions, but because every answer she had just received had created 10 more. Her past. Her choices. The people she trusted. None of it felt untouched anymore. You said I was part of this, she finally said, her voice quieter now, but sharper. What does that actually mean? Ethan didn't look away. Because this was the line. The one he had been waiting for. It means your life wasn't as random as you thought, he said. Charlotte felt her chest tighten. I chose my life, she replied. I made my own decisions. Ethan nodded slightly. You did, he said. A pause. But the paths in front of you. Another pause. Were never entirely yours. Silence filled the space again. Not empty. Heavy. Because now the question wasn't just what happened. It was how far back it started. Charlotte leaned forward slightly. Start from the beginning, she said. Ethan exhaled slowly. Not out of hesitation. But because the beginning wasn't simple. 7 years ago, he said. When I disappeared, it wasn't just about my brother. Charlotte didn't interrupt. Didn't look away. Because something told her. This was the part that mattered most. There was a list, Ethan continued. A list of names tied to a financial network moving money through legal fronts. Charlotte's mind immediately connected the pieces. Nathan, she said. Ethan nodded. He was on it. A brief pause. But he wasn't the only one. Charlotte felt a cold realization begin to form. And me? She asked quietly. Ethan held her gaze. You weren't on the list. A beat. You were next to it. Confusion flickered across her face. What does that mean? It means, Ethan said carefully. Your name appeared in connection to someone else. Charlotte's breath slowed. Because now, this wasn't about coincidence anymore. Who? She asked. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Because even now, saying it out loud changed things. Your father. Charlotte froze. The world didn't spin. It didn't crash. It didn't shatter. It simply stopped. That's not possible, she said quietly. Not defensive. Not emotional. Just certain. Ethan didn't argue. Didn't push. Because denial is part of understanding. He was never charged, Ethan said. Never exposed. Charlotte shook her head slowly. My father built everything he had from nothing, she said. He's not part of anything like that. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Exactly, he said. Charlotte's brows pulled together. What is that supposed to mean? It means he's careful, Ethan replied. A man doesn't stay clean in a system like that unless he knows exactly where to stand. Charlotte's heart began to beat faster again. Not from fear. From resistance. Because this wasn't just about her. This was about the foundation of everything she believed in. You're wrong, she said. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket again. This time, he pulled out a thin folder. Raymond glanced at it briefly. Then looked away. Because he already knew what was inside. Ethan held it out. Not forcing. Not insisting. Just offering. Charlotte hesitated. Just for a second. Then took it. Her fingers felt colder now. As if her body already knew what her mind wasn't ready to accept. She opened it slowly. Page by page. Names. Transactions. Dates. Connections. And then she saw it. Her father's name. Not at the center. Not leading anything. But there. Connected. Linked. Present. Charlotte's breath caught. Not loudly. But enough. This doesn't prove anything, she said. But her voice wasn't as certain anymore. Ethan watched her carefully. It proves he knew, he said. Charlotte closed the folder quickly. Too quickly. As if shutting it would make the truth disappear with it. No, she said. But this time. The word didn't land the same way. Ethan didn't push further. Because he didn't need to. The doubt was already there. Why didn't you tell me before, she asked. Ethan's answer came quietly. Because you weren't ready. Charlotte looked up at him sharply. And now I am. Ethan held her gaze. Now you don't have a choice. Silence. Because that was the truth of it. Not timing. Not strategy. Reality. Charlotte leaned back slowly, the folder still in her hands. Her thoughts moved faster than she could organize them. Her father. Nathan. The network. Everything connected in ways she had never imagined. So what happens now, she asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. Now we find out where he stands. Charlotte's grip tightened slightly on the folder. And if he's part of it? Ethan's expression didn't change. Then we deal with it. The words weren't harsh. They weren't cold. They were simply unavoidable. Charlotte closed her eyes for a brief moment. Because this was the part no one prepares you for. Choosing between what you believed and what is real. When she opened her eyes again, something had changed. Not completely. Not resolved. But clearer. Take me to him, she said. Ethan didn't respond right away. Because this decision couldn't be undone. But when he saw her expression, he understood. All right, he said. The helicopter shifted slightly, changing direction. And somewhere ahead, a different kind of confrontation waited. Not with an enemy. Not with a stranger. But with the truth. And this time, there would be no illusion left to hide behind. The sky had changed by the time the helicopter shifted course. The light was softer now, stretched thin across the horizon, as if the day itself was holding its breath. Below them, the city slowly gave way to quieter roads, wider spaces, and long shadows that reached across fields and glass estates hidden behind layers of security and silence. Charlotte didn't ask how long it would take. She didn't ask where exactly they were going. Because deep down, she already knew. Her father never chose places that were easy to reach. He chose places that were difficult to approach. Difficult to observe. Difficult to leave without being noticed. The estate appeared gradually, almost blending into the landscape until the structure revealed itself fully, modern, controlled, precise. Not extravagant, the interior was exactly as she remembered. Minimal. Ordered. Controlled. Nothing out of place. Nothing unnecessary. A house that didn't reveal anything about the man who owned it. He was standing in the center of the room. Dressed simply. Hands behind his back. Calm. As if he had been expecting this exact moment. Charlotte. Her name. Spoken without surprise. Without confusion. As if she had never left. She stopped a few steps away from him. The distance between them felt smaller than it should have. "You came early," he said. Charlotte didn't respond to that. Instead, she held up the folder. "I need you to explain this." No hesitation. No softening. No pretending. Her father's gaze moved briefly to the folder. Then back to her face. "You always preferred direct answers," he said. Charlotte's jaw tightened slightly. "Then give me one." A pause. Not long. But deliberate. Ethan remained silent behind her. Not stepping forward. Not interrupting. Because this belonged to her. Her father exhaled slowly. Not tired. Not reluctant. Just acknowledging the moment. "You shouldn't have seen that yet," he said. Charlotte's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yet," she repeated. Another pause. Then. "Yes." The word landed heavier than anything else. Because it meant one thing. There was more. Charlotte took a step closer. "Were you involved?" she asked. The room didn't change. The air didn't shift. But something inside her did. Because she wasn't asking as a daughter anymore. She was asking as someone who needed the truth. Her father studied her for a moment. Long enough to understand something had changed. "You're not asking the right question," he said. Charlotte didn't blink. "Then tell me the right one." Silence. Then. "What do you think I protected you from?" The question caught her off guard. Not because it didn't make sense. But because it reframed everything. Charlotte's breath slowed. "I didn't need protection," she said. Her father's expression didn't change. "Yes," he replied. "You did." The words weren't loud. But they were absolute. Charlotte shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "You don't get to decide that without telling me the truth." A flicker. Small. But there. For the first time. He looked at her not as someone to guide. But as someone who had already stepped beyond that. "You think this is about money," he said. Charlotte didn't respond. Because that was exactly what she thought. "It isn't," he continued. Another pause. Longer this time. Because what came next would change everything. "It's about control." The words settled into the room. Heavy. Unavoidable. Charlotte felt it immediately. Because she had just escaped that exact thing. Nathan wasn't the problem, her father said. Ethan's posture shifted slightly behind her. Not aggressively. But aware. "He was a piece," her father continued. "A useful one." Charlotte's chest tightened. "And you?" she asked. Her father didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Just closer. "Everything I've done," he said quietly, "was to make sure you never became one of those pieces." Charlotte's breath caught. Because suddenly, this wasn't simple anymore. "By not telling me anything?" she asked. "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. Silence followed. Because now, there was no misunderstanding. "You don't trust me," Charlotte said. Her father shook his head slightly. I don't trust the world you were standing in. Charlotte's fingers tightened slightly around the folder. And now? She asked. Her father looked at her. Really looked this time. And for the first time, there was something different in his expression. Not control. Not certainty. Respect. Now, he said. You're standing in it with your eyes open. The words landed. Deep. Charlotte exhaled slowly. Because whether she liked it or not, he wasn't entirely wrong. She had seen it now. The layers. The manipulation. The system behind everything. And she had walked out of it. But stepping out didn't mean she was free from it. Then help me understand it, she said. Her father didn't answer immediately. Instead, his gaze shifted. Past her. To Ethan. And in that moment, the air changed again. Because whatever came next was no longer just about Charlotte. It was about everything. And everyone. There are moments when silence says more than conflict ever could. When two men stand in the same room, not speaking, not moving, and yet everything between them feels like it's already been decided long ago. Charlotte felt it before either of them said a word. The shift. Subtle. But absolute. Her father's gaze rested on Ethan now, steady and unreadable, as if measuring something that couldn't be seen on the surface. Ethan didn't step forward. Didn't challenge. But he didn't step back either. Because this wasn't a confrontation built on emotion. It was something older. Something colder. So, her father said finally, his voice calm, almost thoughtful. You're the one who brought her here. Ethan held his gaze. She chose to come. A small pause. Then. A faint, almost imperceptible nod. Acknowledgement. Not agreement. Charlotte looked between them, the tension building in a way that didn't need raised voices to be understood. You know each other, she said. Neither of them answered immediately. Because the answer wasn't simple. Not personally, Ethan said at last. But I know what he represents. Her father's expression didn't change. And what is that? He asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. A man who stands close enough to power to influence it, without ever being seen as part of it. Silence. Because the statement wasn't an accusation. It was a conclusion. Charlotte's breath slowed slightly. Because now, this wasn't just about her. This was something much larger. Her father turned his attention back to her. You've been told half of a story, he said. Charlotte's jaw tightened. Then tell me the rest. Another pause. Then. Control isn't about money, he said. It's about who decides what happens, before anyone else even knows there was a choice. The words settled into the room. Heavy. Deliberate. Charlotte thought of Nathan. Of the way he spoke. The way he moved. The way he made decisions feel inevitable. And suddenly, she understood. He wasn't just laundering money, she said slowly. Her father nodded. He was managing outcomes. Charlotte's chest tightened. And the network? Ethan answered this time. Is built on people like him. Her father didn't correct him. Didn't argue. Because he didn't need to. It's bigger than you think, he said to Charlotte. Much bigger. A silence followed. Because now, the scale of everything was beginning to show. Charlotte looked down briefly at the folder in her hand. Then back up. And you're part of it. Not a question. Her father's gaze didn't waver. I exist near it, he said. Charlotte frowned slightly. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters, he replied. Frustration flickered through her. Stop speaking in circles, she said. I need to know where you stand. Another pause. Longer this time. Because this was the question he had been avoiding. Her father stepped closer. Just one step. But enough to shift, but as someone who had already stepped beyond that role. You want everything? He asked. Charlotte didn't hesitate. Yes. A long pause followed. Then. He nodded. Then understand this, he said. His voice didn't rise. Didn't sharpen. But something in it changed. The moment you fully step into this. A pause. You don't get to step out again. Charlotte held his gaze. Her heart steady. Her mind clear. I already did, she said. Silence. Because that was the truth. She had stepped into it the moment she sent that message. The moment she chose not to stay silent. The moment she walked away from Nathan. There was no going back. Her father exhaled slowly. And for the first time. There was no resistance left in him. Then we don't have time to waste, he said. Ethan stepped forward slightly now. The distance between them narrowing, not in conflict, but in alignment. What's the next move? He asked. Her father looked between them. Then. Spoke the words that changed everything. They're going to come for her. The room went still. Charlotte didn't react immediately. But something inside her shifted. Because now. This wasn't just about truth. It was about survival. And the war she never knew existed. Had just found her. There is a moment in every quiet life when danger stops being distant. It stops being something that happens to other people. Stops being something you hear about, read about, walk past without truly seeing. And instead. It turns toward you. Directly. Personally. Unavoidably. Charlotte didn't ask who. She didn't ask why. Because she already knew enough to understand one thing. It didn't matter. They're going to come for her. The words still echoed in the room, not loud, not dramatic, but final in a way that made everything else irrelevant. Charlotte stood very still. Not frozen. Not afraid. But aware in a way she had never been before. Because now. She wasn't standing beside the problem. She was part of it. Ethan moved first. Not rushed. But immediate. His attention shifted outward, toward the windows, the structure, the space around them. Calculating. Adapting. Because whatever came next. Wouldn't wait. How soon? He asked. Her father didn't hesitate this time. Soon enough that we shouldn't still be standing here. That was answer enough. Charlotte felt something settle inside her. Not panic. Not fear. Something colder. Clearer. What do they want from me? She asked. Her father looked at her. And for a brief moment. Something almost like regret passed through his expression. You, he said quietly. Are leverage. The word didn't shock her. It didn't surprise her. Because she had already seen how people like Nathan operated. How control worked. They can't reach me directly, her father continued. So they reach for what matters. Charlotte exhaled slowly. Because now. The situation had simplified. This isn't about me, she said. Ethan looked at her. Yes, he replied. It is. Charlotte shook her head slightly. No, she said. It's about him. She glanced briefly toward her father. And now, it's about you too. Ethan didn't argue. Because she wasn't wrong. Silence settled again. But this time. It wasn't reflective. It was tactical. We don't have time to stay exposed, Raymond said from near the entrance, his voice calm but firm. There are already movements on the outer perimeter. Charlotte turned toward him. How many? Raymond didn't answer immediately. Instead, he touched the small device in his ear, listening. Then. Enough. That was all anyone needed to hear. Ethan stepped closer to Charlotte. We need to move, he said. She nodded. No hesitation. Where? She asked. Her father answered this time. Somewhere they won't expect. Charlotte frowned slightly. They're expecting me to run, she said. A small pause. Then. Her father nodded. Yes. Charlotte's eyes sharpened. Then we don't run. The words landed differently. Because they weren't emotional. They were strategic. Ethan studied her for a second. Then. A faint shift in his expression. Understanding. You want to stay, he said. Charlotte shook her head slightly. No, she replied. I want to choose where this happens. Silence. Because that changed the situation. Her father looked at her carefully. And for the first time, there was no hesitation in how he saw her. You're thinking like them, he said. Charlotte met his gaze. No, she replied. I'm thinking ahead of them. A beat. Then. Her father nodded. Ethan exhaled quietly. Because now. This wasn't about protecting her anymore. It was about working with her. All right, he said. What's your move? Charlotte didn't look away. Didn't second guess. They expect me to disappear, she said. To hide. To be moved somewhere safe. A pause. So we give them that. Raymond's brow shifted slightly. A decoy? Charlotte nodded. Yes. Her father crossed his arms slowly, considering. And you? He asked. Charlotte's voice didn't change. I go somewhere they don't think I'd ever choose. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. Which is? Charlotte held his gaze. Back. Silence. Because the answer was unexpected. Even now. The city, she continued. The same world I just walked out of. Raymond shook his head slightly. That's the first place they'll check. Charlotte didn't disagree. They'll check for someone hiding, she said. Not someone walking straight through the front door. Ethan watched her carefully. Because what she was suggesting wasn't safe. Wasn't simple. But it made sense. They'll assume you're under protection, he said. Charlotte nodded. Exactly. A pause. So we make sure it looks like I am. Her father exhaled slowly. Not dismissing the idea. Not rejecting it. You're asking to step directly into the open, he said. Charlotte didn't hesitate. I already did, she replied. Another silence. Because there was no argument left. Ethan looked at Raymond. A brief exchange. No words. Just understanding. Then he turned back to Charlotte. If we do this, he said. You don't make a single move alone. Charlotte met his gaze. Then don't let me. The words were simple. But they carried weight. Because this was trust. Ethan nodded once. Then we do it your way. Outside, the wind shifted slightly. Subtle. But different. Raymond's voice came again. They're getting closer. Charlotte didn't look toward the windows this time. Didn't search for movement. Didn't wait to see the danger. Because she already knew. It was coming. And this time. She wouldn't run from it. She would meet it. Head on. The decision didn't feel reckless. It didn't feel brave. It felt inevitable. Like something that had been waiting beneath every choice Charlotte had made since the moment she sent that message. If you still want me, come get me. She hadn't just been asking to be saved. She had been choosing a direction. And now. She was following it all the way through. The house didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt like a place that had already served its purpose. Information had been revealed. Truth had been exposed. And now, it was time to move. Her wedding dress, perfect, untouched, symbolic, suddenly felt like something that belonged to another life entirely. She didn't hesitate. Didn't look at it again. She turned and walked toward the adjacent room. Minutes later, she stepped back out. Gone was the image of the bride. In its place, someone else. Simple black clothing. Hair pulled back. No jewelry. No softness. Ethan's gaze lingered for a second longer than expected. Not because of how she looked, but because of what it meant. She wasn't playing a role anymore. She was stepping into one. "Ready?" he asked. Charlotte nodded. Her father moved toward the table, pressing a small panel hidden beneath its surface. A section of the wall shifted silently, revealing a concealed passage leading away from the main structure. Charlotte raised an eyebrow slightly. "Of course you have that." Her father didn't respond. He didn't need to. "Decoy leaves first," Raymond said. 30 seconds later, "You move." Charlotte looked at Ethan. "What about you?" He didn't hesitate. "I'm with you." A pause. Then, she nodded. The plan unfolded quickly. One of Raymond's team members, similar height, similar build, moved into position, dressed in clothing designed to mimic Charlotte's silhouette under observation. From a distance. Convincing enough. "Go," Raymond signaled. The decoy exited through the main door. Visible. Exposed. Exactly what they expected. Seconds ticked by. Each one stretching just enough to be felt. "Now," Raymond said. Charlotte stepped into the hidden passage. Ethan followed immediately behind her. The wall closed silently. Darkness. Then dim light. A narrow corridor leading away from the house. For a moment, it was just them. No watchers. No enemies. No pressure. And in that space, Charlotte exhaled. "You trust me a lot," she said quietly. Ethan's voice came from just behind her. "I trust who you've become." She didn't respond immediately. Because those words meant more than they sounded. The corridor ended at a secondary exit. A vehicle already waiting. Engine running. Driver alert. They stepped out into open air again. Different angle. Different view. Far enough from the main house that no one watching would connect the movement. Raymond's voice came through the earpiece. "They've taken the decoy." Charlotte paused. Just for a fraction of a second. Ethan watched her. "You knew that might happen." She nodded slowly. "I did. But knowing something and hearing it happen were two different things." "They'll realize soon," Raymond continued. "Maybe not immediately. But soon." Charlotte stepped into the car. Ethan followed. The door shut. "Then we don't give them time to think," she said. The vehicle pulled away. Fast. Controlled. Behind them. The house. The confrontation. The version of her life that had just ended. Ahead. The city. The place she had just escaped. And now. The place she was choosing to return to. Ethan glanced at her. "One last chance to change your mind." Charlotte looked out the window. The horizon shifting as they moved. "No," she said quietly. Then she turned to him. "I'm done running." The words settled between them. Solid. Unbreakable. And somewhere, far behind them, the people who had taken the decoy would soon realize their mistake. And when they did, they would come harder. Faster. More dangerous than before. But by then, Charlotte would already be where they least expected. Right in the middle of everything. Waiting. The city didn't welcome her back. It didn't resist her either. It simply continued, indifferent, relentless, alive in a way that didn't pause for anyone's decisions or consequences. Traffic moved. Lights changed. People walked past one another without noticing the quiet shift happening beneath the surface. But Charlotte felt it. The moment they crossed back in. She knew. This place hadn't changed. She had. The car moved through familiar streets, but everything looked different now. Buildings she had passed 100 times before no longer felt neutral. Every corner, every reflection in glass, every passing figure carried potential. Not danger. Possibility. They'll check the obvious first, Raymond's voice came through the earpiece, calm and steady. Airports. Private hangars. Safe houses tied to Ethan. Charlotte glanced at Ethan briefly. He didn't react. Because they both understood. That was exactly why they weren't going to any of those places. Then we give them something else to chase, she said. Ethan looked at her. You already did. Charlotte shook her head slightly. No, she said. That was just the beginning. The car slowed slightly as it approached a busier district. More people. More movement. More noise. Perfect. Stop here, Charlotte said. The driver hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then followed the instruction. Ethan frowned slightly. This isn't the plan. Charlotte opened the door. It is now. She stepped out before he could stop her. The air hit her differently here. Warmer. Louder. Alive. People brushed past her without a second glance. No one looking. No one noticing. Exactly what she needed. Ethan stepped out behind her immediately. Charlotte. She turned toward him. And for the first time since they left the house. There was something sharper in her expression. If we keep moving like targets, we'll be treated like targets, she said. Ethan held her gaze. And if we don't? Charlotte glanced around briefly. Then back at him. We disappear in plain sight. A pause. Ethan exhaled slowly. Because once again. She wasn't wrong. Raymond's voice cut in. You're exposed. Charlotte tapped the earpiece lightly. I'm invisible, she replied. A brief silence followed. Then. Temporary, Raymond said. Charlotte allowed the smallest hint of a smile. Temporary is enough. She started walking. Not fast. Not slow. Just, natural. Ethan followed beside her. Not leading. Not directing. Matching her pace. For a few minutes. They were just two people moving through a city that didn't care who they were. And in that space. Something shifted again. Not in the world around them. But between them. You've changed, Ethan said quietly. Charlotte didn't look at him immediately. I had to, she replied. A pause. I wasn't ready before. Ethan studied her profile. And now? Charlotte finally turned her head slightly. Now I don't have the luxury of not being ready. The words were simple. But they carried everything. They turned down a narrower street. Quieter. Less crowded. More controlled. Charlotte slowed slightly. There's a place ahead, she said. Ethan's brow shifted. What kind of place? Charlotte's eyes focused forward. One that doesn't belong to anyone who matters. He didn't question it. Because at this point, trust wasn't optional. They reached a small building tucked between two larger ones. Unremarkable. Forgettable. Charlotte stepped inside. The interior was dim. Simple. A cafe that had seen better days. Few customers. No attention. Perfect. She moved toward the back table without hesitation. Sat down. Ethan remained standing for a moment. Then joined her. The ordinary world carried on, completely unaware that somewhere inside it, something precise was unfolding. Ethan watched her for a moment. Not questioning. Not interrupting. Because he understood now. She wasn't waiting for something to happen. She was allowing it to. You picked this place for a reason, he said quietly. Charlotte's fingers rested lightly against the table now, no longer tapping. Yes. A pause. It's not on any of the maps that matter. Ethan's brow shifted slightly. Meaning? Charlotte glanced toward the front of the cafe briefly. Then back at him. Places that matter get watched, she said. Places that get watched get patterns. A small pause. This place has none. Ethan leaned back slightly. Considering. And yet you think they'll find you here. Charlotte nodded once. They don't need a map, she said. They just need a mistake. Silence followed. Because that was exactly how people like Nathan had operated. And now, she was thinking the same way. Raymond's voice came through again, lower this time. Movement confirmed. Multiple units. They're spreading out. Charlotte didn't react outwardly. How far? Ethan asked. Close enough, Raymond replied. Charlotte's gaze didn't shift. Didn't search. Didn't betray anything. Good, she said quietly. Ethan looked at her again. You're very calm about this. Charlotte met his eyes. I'm not calm, she said. A pause. I'm prepared. The distinction mattered. Because calm can break. Preparation doesn't. A figure entered the cafe. Then another. Moments apart. Not together. Not obvious. But Charlotte saw it immediately. They're here, she said under her breath. Ethan didn't turn. Didn't look. How many? He asked. 2 inside, she replied. More outside. Raymond's voice confirmed it seconds later. Perimeter tightening. Charlotte exhaled slowly. This is the part where they think they've already won. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. And the part where we prove them wrong. Charlotte's eyes flicked briefly toward the entrance again. They're not here to grab me, she said. Ethan frowned slightly. What do you mean? Charlotte leaned forward just a fraction. They're watching first, she said. Confirming identity. A pause. Making sure I don't slip away like last time. Ethan's voice lowered. Then we don't give them time. Charlotte shook her head slightly. No, she said. We give them exactly what they want. A beat. Ethan studied her. Which is? Charlotte's gaze sharpened. Control. Silence. Because that word had been at the center of everything from the beginning. They think they're taking it, she continued. Ethan leaned forward slightly now. And we let them? Charlotte's lips curved just slightly. Not a smile. Something quieter. Just long enough. At that exact moment, one of the men inside the cafe stood. Moved closer. Not rushing. Not threatening. Professional. Miss Bennett, he said calmly. Charlotte looked up at him. No surprise. No fear. You took your time, she replied. The man didn't react to that. We need you to come with us. Charlotte tilted her head slightly. Do I? A brief pause. The man's tone didn't change. It would be easier if you did. Ethan's hand moved slightly on the table. Subtle. Controlled. Charlotte noticed. And gently. Almost imperceptibly. She shook her head. Not yet. Ethan stilled. Because this was still her move. Charlotte stood slowly. Every movement measured. Every step deliberate. All right, she said. The man stepped back slightly, giving her space. But not freedom. Ethan stood as well. He comes with me, Charlotte added. The man hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then. Fine. That was the first mistake. Charlotte noticed it. Ethan noticed it. Raymond definitely noticed it. Because they had just allowed something they hadn't planned for. Control was already shifting. Charlotte walked toward the door. Ethan beside her. The men falling in step just behind. Outside. The street looked the same. Unchanged. But now. It was a stage. A vehicle waited at the curb. Engine running. Doors already unlocked. Charlotte stopped just short of it. A brief pause. The kind that could mean anything. The man behind her stepped slightly closer. Please, he said. Charlotte looked at the car. Then slowly. Turned her head. Not at the man. At Ethan. And in that moment. Nothing needed to be said. Because the plan had reached its edge. And whatever happened next would decide everything. There is a fraction of a second, so small it almost doesn't exist, where everything is still possible. Where a situation can go one way. Or completely unravel into something else. Charlotte stood at the edge of that moment. One step away from the car. One breath away from surrender. One decision away from turning the entire game. The man behind her waited. Patient. Confident. Because from his perspective, everything was already under control. That was his mistake. Charlotte's gaze lingered on Ethan. Not asking. Not questioning. Just confirming. And Ethan understood. Because this was never about escaping. It was about choosing when to stop pretending. Charlotte turned back toward the car. Slowly. Deliberately. Her hand lifted slightly. As if she were about to open the door. The man behind her relaxed just enough. Second mistake. Because control doesn't disappear all at once. It slips. Quietly. Almost invisibly. And then. It's gone. Charlotte moved. Not away. Not back. Forward. But not into the car. Her hand dropped sharply, knocking the door outward with force, using the sudden motion to disrupt the narrow space between them. Ethan moved at the exact same moment. Precision. Timing. No hesitation. The man closest to Charlotte didn't have time to react properly. His focus had been on compliance. Not resistance. That was all it took. Ethan intercepted the second man before he could reach for anything. Controlled. Silent. Efficient. No chaos. No shouting. Just movement. Fast. Clean. Charlotte stepped back immediately, creating space instead of freezing inside it. Because she wasn't reacting anymore. She was part of the motion. The driver inside the car reached for something. Too late. Raymond's voice cut sharply through the earpiece. Now. A second vehicle screeched into position at the corner. Doors opened. Charlotte didn't hesitate. She moved. Ethan was right behind her. The street shifted instantly. From ordinary to exposed. Someone shouted. A door slammed. Footsteps. Too many. Too close. Charlotte reached the vehicle. Got in. Ethan followed. The door slammed shut. Go. Raymond's voice came through again. The car launched forward. Hard. Behind them. Movement exploded. The vehicle they had almost entered shifted, doors flying open, more men spilling out, realization hitting too late. They had been outplayed. But not for long. They'll regroup, Ethan said, the city closing in around them. And somewhere ahead. The final move was waiting. There's a point in every war, quiet, almost invisible, where it stops being about survival. And becomes about resolution. Not who runs. Not who hides. But who decides how it ends. The car didn't slow. It didn't hesitate. It moved with intention, cutting through the city as if every turn had already been chosen long before this moment. Because in a way, it had. Charlotte sat still, her eyes fixed not on the road ahead, but on the reflection in the window. The cars behind them. Distant. Careful. Persistent. They're still there, Ethan said. Charlotte nodded. I know. Her voice wasn't tense. It wasn't rushed. It was steady. Because everything was moving exactly where it needed to go. The vehicle turned sharply into a private underground entrance, disappearing from the open street in a matter of seconds. Darkness swallowed them briefly. Then artificial light replaced it. Cold. Controlled. The doors closed behind them. Silence. The engine cut. For the first time since the cafe. Stillness. Ethan stepped out first, scanning the space automatically. Concrete walls. Multiple levels. No civilians. No randomness. This place, he said quietly. Charlotte stepped out beside him. They won't expect it, she finished. Footsteps echoed lightly as Raymond and two others emerged from the shadows. Already in position. Already prepared. You're ahead of them by 2 minutes, Raymond said. Charlotte nodded once. That's all we need. Ethan looked at her. You've been here before. Charlotte didn't deny it. My father owns half the places no one thinks about, she said. A pause. This is one of them. Raymond moved toward a panel on the wall, pressing a sequence that triggered a quiet mechanical response above them. Something shifting. Something locking into place. They'll follow you in, he said. Charlotte turned slightly. That's the point. A low rumble echoed faintly through the structure. They're here, Raymond confirmed. No panic. No rush. Just timing. Charlotte took a slow breath. This was it. Not the escape. Not the survival. The end. The first vehicle entered the underground space seconds later. Followed by another. Doors opened. Men stepped out. Confident. Armed. Certain. Because from their perspective, they had cornered their target. Charlotte stepped forward into the open. Ethan didn't stop her. Didn't pull her back. Because now, there was nothing to hide. You've been persistent, Charlotte said calmly. The man leading them stepped forward. Different from the others. More composed. More aware. We don't like unfinished business, he replied. Charlotte tilted her head slightly. And you think this is finished? A faint smirk touched his expression. It will be. A pause. For you. Silence settled across the space. Then. Charlotte exhaled. Not nervous. Not afraid. Certain. No, she said quietly. The man's expression didn't change. You misunderstand the situation. Charlotte's gaze sharpened. No, she replied again. This time. A small pause. You do. And just like that. Everything shifted. The lights above them flickered once. Then locked. Heavy doors slammed shut behind the incoming vehicles. Metal against metal. Sealed. The sound echoed through the entire structure. The men turned instinctively. Too late. Raymond's voice came through clearly. Perimeter secured. More figures emerged from the shadows. Not rushed. Not aggressive. Prepared. Positioned. The balance. Gone. The man in front of Charlotte realized it immediately. His posture shifted. Subtly. But enough. You planned this, he said. Charlotte didn't deny it. You followed me here, she replied. A pause. I just made sure it was somewhere you couldn't leave. Silence. Because now. There was no confusion. No misunderstanding. Just truth. The man glanced around briefly. Calculating. Searching for an opening. There wasn't one. Ethan stepped forward now. Standing beside Charlotte. Not in front. Not behind. Beside. Who do you work for? He asked. The man looked at him. A faint smile. Someone you haven't reached yet. Ethan's expression didn't change. Then we're getting closer. A brief silence. Then. The man exhaled. Almost amused. This isn't over, he said. Charlotte held his gaze. I know, she replied. A pause. But this part is. Raymond moved forward. It's done, he said. And this time. It was. No escape. No negotiation. Only consequence. The men were secured quickly. Cleanly. Because this wasn't chaos. This was control. The same thing they had relied on. Now turned against them. Charlotte stood still as everything settled. The tension. The noise. The motion. All of it fading. Ethan looked at her. It's over, he said quietly. Charlotte took a slow breath. No, she replied softly. A pause. This is just the part we can see. Ethan didn't argue. Because he knew. She was right. But something had changed. The fear. The uncertainty. The weight of being hunted. Gone. Replaced by something else. Clarity. Choice. Freedom. Charlotte looked at Ethan. Really looked at him. 7 years, she said quietly. Ethan nodded. 7 years. A small silence passed between them. Not heavy. Not unresolved. Complete. Now what? He asked. Charlotte looked around the emptying space. The sealed doors. The end of something that had once felt impossible to escape. Then back at him. Now, she said. We build something real. No more running. No more illusions. Just truth. Ethan's expression softened slightly. Together? Charlotte didn't hesitate. She reached for his hand. And this time. It wasn't a question. Yes. And somewhere far beyond the city. Beyond the noise. Beyond the shadows that had followed them. A different life waited. Not perfect. Not simple. But theirs. And for the first time. That was enough.